Hello, Rick Reeves here again. Part 2 of the P-35 wing skin fabrication. And today we're going to go over some polishing, painting, and then following it right on up to finish. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you. So I've gotten to the point now where I have the rest of the panel all sanded down all the way up 2000 grit. So I've dried it off, placed it on my table, cleaned off my table, make sure I don't have anything on here. It's going to get in the way of the polishing process, contaminate, cause scratches, whatever. So I want to kind of give you a basic rundown of the pieces that I use here. I like using a 3-inch wool pad to do the polishing with my 90 degree. Believe it or not, I've polished most everything on the plane at this point with this. The reason I don't grab the bigger 9-inch buffer is because I have a lot of opened edges here, and you come across that and grab that and damage your material. This piece here I can control a lot better in the direction that I polish, bring it up, and pay attention to more of the sections as I go. The different polishes I use, I like the product Nuvite. They're out of New York, I believe, Brooklyn, New York area. They have different grits, different grades, and I'll use 2 or 3 different types. Once I have it sanded to the fine finish that I have at this point, I have to go with a semi kind of a polished grit. Can't even remember. It's a G6 is what they refer to it as. It's kind of a mid-grade polish. It'll bring up the initial shine. Then I'll go over it with like the A. Gives it a little bit better, again, brings up the shine a little bit more, and then I'll finalize with the S, and then I'll do it by hand. So I'll go over this a couple of times, kind of read how it's going, how it's coming up as to if I need to reapply. I'll use microfiber rags, pretty much like these here. Start out with clean ones. They unfortunately get damaged and dirty pretty quick, so we'll go through a few of them. The couple things that you'll notice is all the holes here will kind of hold polish, so it'll kind of pull it out of the hole and continue to mark. So once I start doing it by hand, that'll minimize that and get me to a nicer shine. So let me go ahead and quit talking and kind of show you how this works. I'll use the mask because even though when it goes on like a paste, it does dry up and gets in your nose, so I try to put the mask on and minimize that. So as I begin, you can instantly see that this paste turns to a black. What that is that's just the aluminum coming off, minor amount. So the aluminum at point of completion is one of the prettiest pieces to see, but the process of getting it there is probably the dirtiest. It makes quite a mess, but the end results are quite impressive. Go ahead and do this one section here. This is the same section that I sanded earlier on camera. We'll go ahead and bring this section up and we'll go through it with the different rouges. I try to push this around here for obvious reasons, otherwise you end up spinning it all over you and your toolboxes or whatever else is around the area. Cameraman. You can already see the reflection of me working over the piece with just this first attempt. And go to the next step. You can see the difference at this point. I'm looking down in it now. I don't see any real hard scratches, no real DA marks that are jumping out at me at this point, so the sanding went well. So I'll go ahead and go to the next step and see if we can't bring this up a little shinier. I haven't changed pads yet here. I'm still trying to work all this in, but as I progress into the more finer, I will then change to a clean pad that's
It's going to better pull those little marks out. At this point, I'm just trying to get that polish up to a standard that I'm looking for, and so there's no sense of waste the pads on each time. I guess if I wanted to be real picky, I could rotate the pads on each polish, but for the application I'm going, I'm content with doing it this way.
See the metal picking up? It's warming it up, so it's expanding a little bit. Kind of silly, but once that cools down, that'll actually set back down.
You can see that setting down as I walked away from it.
I'm kind of watching what it wants to do. You'll notice I'm fluctuating my speed as well, and changing the speed around as I start dispersing the material. I bring it up a little bit. I'm kind of watching what it wants to do. As you bring it up, obviously it creates more friction, and it dries out the material a little bit more and kind of utilizes it at that point. The other issue I'm having, it's not really an issue, it's just something you have to understand, is that the holes are all grabbing material. So I'm constantly pulling out that little bit of residual material. So it's kind of getting in my way, so to speak, but it's still doing the job it needs. It's just not giving me that crisp, even shine. I'll have to go over it with a rag and kind of do it by hand and remove that stuff. And you learn it as you go as to what you can get away with. And the day may change, the humidity, the temperature, all that has a factor to do with it as well. So I just kind of watch what it's doing and have it tell me what it wants to do as far as the speed or the material that I'm using, or the amount of times I may have to go over it. And again, I'm not using a lot of material and I'm putting it over. Now, this is probably like a 1 foot by 16, 18 inch area, roughly. This is the S. This is the final step that you would typically use. Again, I've kind of gone 1, 2, 3 with the same pad. I'll change out to a fresh pad and go back over it again with the S, and then I'll go over it by hand once or twice. It should pretty much finish it up. These pads are still usable. I use them right up to the point where they start coming apart or gumming up so bad you can't work with them anymore. A lot of times you take a sharper edge or even the edge of the table, it'll remove some of the caked on material. Kind of check and make sure it's centered up so it doesn't spin silly on you. Rub this in a little bit lightly. I'm not trying to take it off of here, I'm trying to spread it out on here. Use that fresh pad and kind of give me a little bit cleaner shine, and we'll go over it a couple times by hand. I'm not really trying to rub it or polish it, I'm just trying to spread this out on here.
At this point, with the final S polish, you can see it's definitely headed in the right direction. I'm simply just working this material in now, utilizing the pad to keep bringing it up better each pass.
I'm going to go over it by hand. With still the S finished product. Not using much. Okay, I'm going to rub this in at this point and actually start using this rag as my polisher instead of the wool pad. Just going to Not going crazy and not pushing real hard. Just kind of letting the rag and the polish do its job. I'll get this to about 70-80% of where I want it, and then I'll go ahead and proceed with, doing the rest of the panel and then getting it prepped for paint. And once I do that and install the panel, then I'll go ahead and do the finish polish on it and get it up to its full potential at that point, because you're going to mark it up with working with it, putting tape on it to paint the other side. There's no sense in taking it to 100% yet. This is showing me that all the imperfections are out of the metal and it will take a nice shine. So
the amount of material is coming off, if you notice, there's very little on the table. When I sanded, there was very little on the table at that point, so the amount of material that's coming off here is very minimal.
That's pretty good. I'll go ahead and move on to the next section. So I've got this piece completely polished now to the point of I'm happy with it. So what I'm going to do now is prep for paint. I have a lap section here so you can see where it's not polished. There was no need for that. It's going to get sanded and primered and painted for the lap joint that goes on here. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that and then start taping off and getting ready to go in the booth with this thing. Just set it up here with a couple of clecos so I know I don't have my marks right. The point of setting this up on here is simply to, I want to take paint just underneath this. Obviously you want to leave the polished areas polished. So
I'm going to mark this exactly where this panel lays with Sharpie marker. And the reasons for that is simply just to keep my paint underneath the edge. We don't want to see paint coming out the polished edge. We want to go right to it. So as you watch me lay this out, that's my intent.
And this piece is already painted, silver finish underneath. I like the blue fine line tape. Likes to keep a crisp edge, doesn't let any bleed through like masking tape will.
In order to prep the surface for paint, I'll simply use just a medium textured Scotch-Brite pad and scuff the surface at that point. It allows the primer to properly stick and adhere to it. You leave it smooth and shiny like that, there's a good chance the paint's going to peel.
Once I'm done taping off the area I intend to keep exposed for paint, I have to tape all of the holes that I've drilled in this to keep from when I paint the backside. I don't need any blow by, meaning if I just papered this off and didn't consider this, I'd have everywhere I leave a hole open, it's gonna blow paint in here and get on my polished surface. So I'm gonna go ahead and tape all these rivet lines.
The reason I chose to go polish then paint is obviously the process in getting the material ready for polish. I would have long ago destroyed the paint that was inside, so the best way I found to keep the finish pure and clean inside is to do that last. To have done it the other way, I would have definitely destroyed the paint along the way of prepping the surface on the exterior between all the sanding I was doing and polishing as well.
It may seem like a little bit of a waste of tape, but for a couple dollar roll of tape, I have a half a day into polishing this thing, so. Once I get the field all taped off, I'll go ahead and beat around the whole perimeter here. The reason it was clecoed in is just simply to keep it attached to the table while I was polishing it. so I didn't move it around on me. This is going to cover the holes on the edge as well as give me tape right to the edge that I can then use a razor blade and clean off. The reason I'm trimming this off is I don't need it rolling over onto my painted side as I have this in the booth, so it's easier just to remove it right to the edge.
When I move these thin panels, you'll notice I roll them right away. Kind of create a little rigidity to the panel instead of trying to hold it and move it flat. It gives me a controlled feel for the panel, so it's not going to do anything silly and possibly create a kink.
I'm going to go ahead and run paper.
I'm very cautious as to where my material is and the blade is in reference to the skin. I picked up the edge of the paper clearly just to give me a little distance between the two. Don't need to put any marks in that skin at this point. We're too far along. Making sure here that I'm running the full span of the paper with the tape. Again, tape is cheap, and for me to risk blowing a bunch of paint onto that polished surface would definitely set me back a little bit. So it's definitely something to consider, is to just tape all the edges. The surface that's already completed is protected.
All right, that's good. Got it taped off. It's protected from the paint. Shouldn't scratch up. This piece here, now what I'm going to do is Scotch-Brite this area here, and it'll then get wiped down, of course, like the backside, and ready for the paint booth. Ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and just lightly Scotch-Brite the area where my polish ran over to my surface that I'm planning on painting. Just a nice medium Scotch-Brite pad, not going anything too aggressive. Stand right up to my tape line. I need that primer to stick. I don't need it to peel off on the underneath.
I'm being careful here not to rough the edges of the tape. Like I said, I was trying to keep the tape lines crisp. Just makes for a better, cleaner job. Probably not the end of the world if it wasn't, but just trying to keep consistent with everything and keep it clean.
Okay, so at this point I'll find my way to the paint booth, prep the backside, and then this section here, mix some primer, and then if we can't finish this thing up today and get ready to have this thing to install for tomorrow. Filming me now? on, you follow me, cameraman. Oh my gosh.
Hope Phil can keep up. So what I've done here, normally I would have laid this flat on a couple of horses and 2x4s or something like that, but with having this other piece on the other side, I had to catch the end. Chose to hang it up, that way I can get them all at one time, so that way it didn't take me 2 separate days, that I was able to do it all at the same day. So as you can see, I've Scotch-Brited this side as well. It's all ready for primer. We're going to go with 2 coats of epoxy primer, then we'll follow that up with 2 coats of base coat silver interior color, and then finalize that with 2 coats of flat clear.
Real quick, this is the 2-part epoxy primer by Sterling that I use for most everything that I do with metal, aluminum. Sticks real well, covers real well. Shoot rivets into it, doesn't peel, doesn't flake off. It's got excellent adhesion when the surface is properly prepped. Just all around good epoxy primer. I'm gonna have to mix this up. It's a 1-to-1, and it'll set for and cure for an hour in the cup. And then once that's ready to done, then I go ahead and spray it on the panel. And I'll wait 30 minutes to an hour, usually an hour. Put my base coat on, which will be my silver base. I use a Global, which is by PPG. I found that silver matches the interior color the best. And then at that point, once that sets for 30 minutes to an hour, I then go ahead and put a flat clear urethane over top of it. Seals it up and keeps it durable, as well as gives it that flat finish that we're looking for.
I'm going to go with a nice medium coat here, and then I'll follow it up with a second coat to cover the balance of what might have been missed. First coat's intended for simply a, so to speak, like a tack coat. You go putting it on too fast, too thick, and it'll tend to want to run on you and build up unnecessarily. So we'll put this on here in 2 coats. I'm making sure I reach up and get my edges best I can. So now I've let this tack up for probably like 15 minutes. So I'm going to go through and put another coat on it, final coat, and this should kind of give me a good even coverage. I'm going to let this dry for about an hour, and then I'll come back and put the silver base coat on at this point.
The base coat, the silver base that I've come up with that I use for the interior of the P-35. I'm putting this over top of the 2 coats of epoxy yellow primer that we've already applied on the piece. From here, it's a 1-to-1 mix. PPG product. It's probably one of the better ones out there that I've found. The biggest issue I had was the silver that we find as we put flat clear over it, it ended up turning it gray. So now that we're able to utilize this particular pigment of this, it stays silver, which is perfect for us. So a little bit of homework we had to do and trial and error. Bring this up to 24 ounces total. this sit for a little while, and I'll go ahead and apply 2 to 3 coats of this on the panel.
I'm just trying to give an even light coat on this. Again, I like to put it on a couple different layers. Try to build this up all at one time is not going to be beneficial. It's much better to go in 2 or 3 applications, so that's why you'll see me do a few coats. So this is the second coat. We'll go at this point and see if I need to do a third. So I'm going to do this second coat, and then I'm going to go ahead and crisscross my pattern, come right back over top of it, and this will give me a nice even out my pattern, so I'm not having the consistency of going from left to right. Now I'm going to mix it up and kind of come at it with a 45-degree angle and get coverage from a different angle. So I'm just applying here the final coats of the flat clear, and at that point then we'll let it dry overnight and then be able to move forward working towards install. You'll find that this skin has actually taken me several months on and off to complete. A lot of times, you know, we'll get pulled on another project or a hanger dump or something of that nature, so it's not happening over a 2 or 3 day period as such. The calendar time is substantial.
Alright, so I'm out of the booth now. I'm happy with the paint, came out good. It's all painted, clear coated, flat. Go ahead and peel the paper off.
So you can clearly see the tape has done its job. Everything's clean underneath there, so all the efforts in taping this off has been beneficial. So with a blue fine line, you can clearly see it did its job as well. Kept my line nice and clean. This way when I do my doubler lap panel on there, it'll stay just right underneath that panel nice and clean, so there's no visual signs of paint peeking out the edges.
So as I mentioned, taping it off, if I wouldn't have put the tape on each hole, I would have had all that blow through onto my polished metal, so wasted a couple dollars in tape, but saved several hours worth of labor cleaning overspray off the finished product. Alright, so I have all my paper off and tape off. I'm going to go ahead and fit this onto the wing, cleco it up, and get ready to load some rivets into it.
This is the skin that we followed through. As you can see, the finish is pretty spot on as far as getting the polish clean and even. So we'll go on at this point, cleco it in place. As long as everything fits, lines up, and everything as it should. I've already pre-fit this skin at one time before any of the polishing. So we'll go ahead and get it loaded with the intent to start putting rivets in. A lot of things I'm looking at as I go together. Even though when we have fit this before, we're making sure that all the seams butt correctly, there's no laps or problems along the way. But as you see it going together, you'll see that I'm just looking and evaluating everything around it and make sure that the parts that I've already put on haven't gotten in my way at this point, and that this piece is continuing to fit as it should.
I'm going to cleco the whole skin on. From there, if I'm happy with it, I'll go ahead and load all the rivets and then get a partner and start shooting.
I've now got it tacked up there, so what I'm going to do is just go ahead and fill the field with clecos. Make sure it's all pulling flat and smooth against the surface and the structure underneath.
Everything looks good, lining up. I'm a big fan of clecos, so some will probably laugh at how many clecos I load, but I'd rather utilize these because I have them. Hold the skin flush. It's a thin skin, so I don't want to leave any large areas not attached. So go every 3 or 4 holes and know that it's secure.
So now I'm just looking over, making sure this thing's pulled in the way I want it to, make sure there's no bumps or anything showing that is out of the ordinary. You can't check this enough to assure that the product's going to come out well when you're done with it. Everything is laying as it's supposed to.
Okay, so I've completed all the clecos on this skin. Very comfortable with the way it fit, the way it held down to the structure. So at this point, what I plan on doing is loading up the rivets and shooting the skin on. All right, so I'm going to load the rivets, starting with the stringers today. And after loading them, I like to put tape on them. It holds them in place. Allows me to load all at one time. That are holes that are available.
So I'm going to go ahead and tape all my rivets in place. This does a couple of things. When I load the field of rivets, obviously if you don't put something on there to hold them in place, they're going to come out. So this tape is going to do a couple of things. The rivet has anodizing on it, so we try not to rub that off. So with putting tape on there, it tends to protect that to some point, as well as holds the rivet in the hole. So it allows me to load the field, which I prefer to do anyway instead of going one by one. I'd rather have the whole field loaded. It allows for more efficiency, as well as just making sure everything's going to continue to line up with the rivet already being in the hole. Here what I'm doing is I'm utilizing some duct tape on the bucking bar. And the reason for this is the steel bar, once you're inside your painted surface and just the aluminum surface in general, if you don't put some kind of protective material on the bucking bar, you'll tend to want to mar, or maybe even damage your material inside. So I've always been a big fan of kind of taping up the bar on the edges, so if you do end up riding on any of the structure inside, it minimizes any risk of scratches, damage, or marking. So at this point, I'm communicating with a bucker pretty much 9 times out of 10. Unless I'm seeing something on the exterior that's a concern, I let the bucker run the show. Tells me the speed we're going to go, tells me when he's on it. I'm out there ready with the gun, and if the gun's what you're operating, until you hear the word from the guy inside, as long as you let him give you the word, there'd be no reason you won't be ready if the bucker's calling the shots from the inside. That way, whoever's in control of the gun outside, they're not in the position to make a mistake as long as the guy inside's calling the shots.
Ready?
Yeah.
Paul's inside, getting himself in position for the rivet. At that point, he'll let me know that he's ready. So then I'll confirm with him, and then we'll go ahead and shoot the rivet. And this follows through pretty much through all the rivets. A lot of times when you get an open field, you can go ahead and kind of work it consistently without much communication, but he's working in a close area here, so there'll be a lot of communicating. So here he's basically telling me as he gets to the next one, he's pushing that rivet out ever so slightly. As I put pressure onto the outside, he kind of eases up, allows me to set the rivet flushly from the outside to where it's not off the surface on there. And then I begin to shoot. And the tone of the rivet, as you hear it when you start shooting, you can clearly tell that he is on a rivet on the inside with a steel bar. So then we continue. As you can hear me ease into the rivet, I don't just come at it 100%. So I ease into that rivet. So it's setting the rivet, letting me know that he is on it before I continue on with any more power or pressure. What I'm doing here is just removing the tape, making sure we don't have any marks or imperfections. Also, removing the tape's letting me know that that rivet's done. He's told me good from inside, so pretty much we're moving on to the next rivet at that point. That rivet's kind of off our radar or our concern at that point. It's done. As you can see now, we've completed the skin. All the rivets are in that I was able to get into this point. The few strays that aren't there yet are waiting for surrounding structures or skins to go on the wing. Thank you so much for following, and we'll keep you updated on the P-35 progress in the next video.
Okay, so I hope everybody enjoyed following Rick on this journey with this beautiful skin that he made. Of course, every part in the wing is done with the same care and attention to detail. There's a lot more to come. The other wing is completely apart right now, so that's going back together. We still have the fuselage and a lot of other detailed things. So keep an eye on the progress on Facebook and YouTube, and enjoy Rick's beautiful work.